Do you believe we can have it all? Can we be moms, wives, caregivers while we run our own businesses, write and market our books? Can we do it all successfully? That's a question I was dying to ask today's guest, Shelley Tyson. Shelley and I recently connected over Instagram. Y'all will love hearing that a friend of mine, shout out to Mary Catherine Tiller, shared on her Instagram that she was a guest on Shelley's podcast, Cultivate Legacy. And Mary Catherine was sharing about motherhood and entrepreneurship. So of course I couldn't wait to hear her episode, but also to discover a new to me podcast to boot. I was so encouraged by both of their hearts and commented on the post how much I enjoyed it. And Shelley reached out to introduce herself and we got to talking in our DMs and she invited me to be a guest on her podcast. So that episode aired recently and I'll link it to it in the show notes because I share my journey from feeling the call to write a book to now using my marketing skills to help all of y'all market yours. And after our interview on her podcast, I just knew it was God's plan for us to meet. From the very beginning of this show, I knew I wanted to share with y'all ideas and strategies to meet new readers and market your message. But one of my other goals was to make sure as we learn all the things book marketing, that we're also keeping our eyes on Jesus when marketing the message he gave us. So after meeting Shelley, I knew she was someone I wanted to come on and dig into this topic of having it all and especially doing it all. So let's get to it. Hey, Shelley, welcome to the Book Marketing Mania podcast. I'm so glad you're here today.
Hey, Kim. Thank you so much for having me. I am so excited to be here.
Me too. Hey, before we get started, could you share a little fun fact about yourself with our listeners?
So a fun fact about me is that I'm actually a twin and I have a twin sister and my mom did not know that she was having twins until after I was born.
Oh my gosh.
Take a second to let that sink in. And so my sister was born 2 hours later and she and I have been inseparable since. So that's a fun fact about me.
Oh, that's adorable. Hey, you watch Friends, don't you?
Yes.
I thought I saw that somewhere. That reminds me of that Friends episode with Chandler.
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
Yes.
That was so funny. Oh, wow. That's amazing. I love that. And also we did a whole episode on our Enneagram numbers and I would love to know what yours is.
So mine's a little bit complicated in the sense that I am a 9 and I'm a 1, wing 1 when I'm at home. So you'll see that pretty strongly. And then when I'm in business, I am a wing 8. And that became pretty obvious to me when I started my entrepreneurial journey. I began to see some things come out in my personality and I was like, I don't know what this is and what to do with it. And the Enneagram was super helpful in figuring out kind of where my strengths and weaknesses were. And so it depends on where I am as to which one of those wings you're going to see more of.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. Because I'm a 9 also, but I'm a wing 1 and I pretty much stay a wing 1. My husband's an 8. So, oh my gosh, I don't have any 8 in me whatsoever.
That's why you have him.
Oh, that's right. We balance each other out somewhat. Well, not really. I don't want to throw the word balance out because I know that's what we're going to talk about today a little bit. Okay. So Shelley, I shared in the introduction kind of how you and I got connected, which I love the fact that it was through a guest on your podcast. And so I would just love for you to tell the listeners a little bit about yourself and what you do for entrepreneurs and maybe a little bit about your podcast. That would be wonderful.
Yeah, so my story is a little bit winding, and so I'm going to save time and skip ahead to the more exciting part, which is I have been married to my husband, Brian, for about 13 years now, and we have 4 kids. They are 10, 8, 6, and 4, almost 7 and 5. And that is my primary job. But about 4 years ago, I felt God opening the door and leading me to become an entrepreneur. And at the time, it looked very messy and not as clear as waking up one day and thinking, oh, I'm just going to go out on my own and I'm going to start this side gig. It was more of I had been in the trench of motherhood for a long time at that point. As you heard, all my kids are close in age and it had been a really intense season. And I was just looking for something that I could kind of build and work on and still be a present mom. And so that's where I became kind of this entrepreneur and I really got just bitten by the bug. I loved everything about it. I loved learning. I loved trying new things. I loved all the people that I was meeting. And through the process of that, God began to really reveal to me some areas that in entrepreneurship kind of bumped up against my theology. And that's just a big word to say my belief system on who I believed God to be, who I believed myself to be, and who I was created to be within that. And I began to try to navigate that world and found that it was quite difficult. And along the way, began to meet other women that were experiencing the same thing. They were Christian women, entrepreneurs. They were driven and building these things, but trying to figure out, how do I do that and glorify God and serve other people abundantly at the same time? And so God just began to stir inside of me this desire to create a safe place for Christian women in entrepreneurship to come and be together in community, but then also to have practical tools and training to be able to help them grapple and navigate with this concept of being a woman of faith in entrepreneurship. And so in November of last year, yes, November of 2020, I began to put together this idea of this online community for these women. And it took shape and launched in February of 2021 of this year. You mentioned podcasts. That was nowhere on the radar. Honestly, it was going to be so simple, a private Facebook group. I was going to bring in people to train. And that was really it. That's all I knew. And people started asking me for these trainings to be put on audio so that they could listen wherever they were. And so I thought, well, I don't know nothing about making a podcast, but I think that you can just take an audio file and just throw it onto a podcast. Mm-hmm. So that is literally how the Cultivate Legacy podcast started, was taking these audio files, rough, no editing at all, and just putting them on this private podcast for our members. And through that, God just began to open up this door for the opportunity to share these free resources with people that they could listen to wherever they were, and just be encouraged that you can be a Christian woman in this space, and you can do it and glorify God, and you can do it and serve others abundantly. So the podcast has been part of that online community. It is not all of it, but it is certainly a part of it. And of course, Kim, that's how you and I got connected. Yes. And only God could have done that.
That's right. I know. Yeah. Had you not put those messages out into the world, I would have never discovered you, never known about you. So I love how God works that way. And we both are podcasters and in that community. And it's just so beautiful to see how things have worked out. And, from the very beginning, I wanted my and I say the very beginning, like this is, I'm just like a couple of months into it, but I wanted to make sure I stayed like really close to my purpose of serving, Christian authors and sharing marketing tips with them. But I also really felt strongly that we wanted to make sure we're keeping our eyes on Jesus as we do that. And so I love that, I just knew along the way, I wanted to have some coaches come into the program. Come into the podcast and serve my listeners. So I was so glad that we got to connect so that I could reach out to you. And I was a guest on your podcast, and that was such a blessing. And then as you just kind of shared your heart throughout that interview, I just knew that you are the one God wanted me to invite onto the podcast. So I'm so glad you're here. And I know we could just talk for hours and hours, but I really wanted to just kind of pick your brain about our listeners who are women of faith and entrepreneurship. And I know sometimes for our listeners, it's really hard to call themselves that, right? They're women of faith for sure, but they're not always thinking of themselves. And I'm guilty of this too, as entrepreneurs, but we are, we're out trying to sell books and programs and things like that. And as you know, it just gets really heavy on the marketing side, and it can really take our attention away from other things, especially our time with God and our families. And so our audience, we have a lot of moms, that are raising families. We have a lot of them that have raised families, but now, they're caretakers for their parents. And, they're just trying to juggle all the things happening in the family, as well as their, authors and speakers or podcasters. And then they have other jobs, full-time jobs too. And so the word balance comes up so often, right? We're just trying to figure out how to balance these different responsibilities we have. And I love that you kind of come into it from a really different, very beautiful way. And so I just wanted to ask you that flat out, like, do you believe we can have it all? Can we be moms, wives? Can we run our own businesses? Can we do it all successfully?
I love this question. And I have to say that a few years ago, this question made me break out in a sweat because everything in me wanted to be able to say, Kim, yes, you can have it all. But along the way, I have realized that that's not wholly true. What is true is you can have it all, just not at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And so the word balance, I am working very hard to eliminate from my vocabulary because the word balance, just by definition, I love definitions of words. And I know you're an author,
Mm-hmm.
so this will probably resonate with you. But the actual word of balance means an equal distribution of weight. And if we look at our priorities or the roles that we play as wives, mothers, business owners, speakers, we are one person trying to play a lot of different roles. And the reality is we cannot give equal weight to all the things all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So I think a better question is, are we creating harmony between the priorities that we have, between the roles that we have? And the word harmony means to act in agreement with. So it is literally like things that are working in harmony, just like musical instruments that are played together and are played so beautifully in harmony. Our priorities and our roles can work in the same way. And so, yes, you're juggling, right? I love that concept of juggling, but the balls that you're juggling are glass and plastic. And sometimes you have to choose which ones are going to go on the ground. And it's going to be those lesser priorities. And it's okay if they sit there for a while. And then you're going to pick up other ones and you're going to focus on the ones that you have in the air and let the other ones stay on the ground. So those two pictures of harmony and the glass and plastic balls are really what I prefer to use as opposed to balance, because I just don't think that that's a realistic expectation for any of us in any season, honestly.
Yeah, so true. And I know as authors, that the seasons kind of come and go when you're marketing, you're launching a book and it's at that release date and there's a lot more that has to be done around then, but then there's a lot more that still has to be done ongoing, right? You're just constantly meeting new readers before your launch, after your launch. But I think we tend to pile so many things on our plate, and it's just overwhelming before you even get to it. And you're just like, I'm tired of it. And I haven't even started marketing, right? And then once you go through a heavy launch, then you just want to lay it down. You're like, I don't even want to think about marketing ever again. But we all know that that's not the case. And so I would love to hear just like from your personal experience, how you have found, to find that harmony in your priorities as a mom, a wife, and a business owner.
Yeah, this is a constant tension, honestly. And it requires a lot of intentionality. And I do it very imperfectly a lot of the time. So I don't want to paint a picture of I have this all figured out yet. But a couple of things that I have really thought a lot about this year, especially after trying to get Cultivate off the ground, which is what the online community is called, is, am I creating rhythms of work and rest that are sustainable? And so that applies to my family life, that applies to my work life. And are all those things working in harmony? And if I start to feel that overwhelm come, it's usually because I have unmet expectations or maybe even unrealistic expectations in my business, and it's causing tension in other areas. So I always go back to the drawing board and say, okay, what are the things that I absolutely have to do? Like no one else can mother my children. No one else can be a spouse to my spouse. So those things have to be priority. No one else can have an intimate relationship with God. I have to do that. So after that, are there things that I don't have to touch? Marketing is a beautiful example of that. And that's why I love what you do, Kim, because marketing is really a way that you can delegate to someone else, keeping all the systems moving in the right direction for marketing and not have to do it all yourself. So I'm a huge proponent of delegating whenever possible, however possible, and as much as possible. And so doing those intentional steps of looking at the tasks, figuring out what I absolutely have to do, and then delegating all the rest is how I navigate. I love that word, navigate those seasons of overwhelm when they do come, because they obviously come. And it looks different depending on if I'm in a launch or not, if I'm in a heavy coaching season or not, if I'm podcasting a lot, it just looks different depending on the season. But those things are kind of markers that help kind of keep me in the straight and narrow.
That's good. How would you describe, like, what does it look like to have a good rhythm in, let's say, just in work, not even in rest, but what does it look like to have a good rhythm in that?
A good rhythm for me looks like I am practicing the habits every single day that help fill my cup first before I open my business, before I start mothering, before I do anything like that. So for me, it's, am I doing those non-negotiable habits of spending time in God's word, of filling my body correctly, of moving my body, and then doing the few things around my house that help keep me sane. That's the one in me coming out. And when I do those things, then it's like it jumpstarts the day in the right direction and keeps the rhythm moving. And if the rhythm gets off and I feel kind of like I'm about to fall off the bike, then I go back to the drawing board and say, hey, maybe I need to practice some of these habits again to get things moving in the right direction. So starting with my relationship with God is number one. Absolutely. If nothing else happens, that has to happen. And I'll be honest, I get up really early to make that happen. I have to, but that is a non-negotiable for me every single day.
That's so great. Yeah. And I think that's so important to remember. And you, I don't know if you mentioned this in the introduction, you homeschool also 4 kids. I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't even know how you do it all. Oh, but it's great harmony, right? You've obviously got great harmony going on and all the things you have to do. But yeah, I think that's so important because I know as women of faith, when things do get busy, that sometimes our time with God is what falls to the bottom, and it shouldn't. Obviously, it needs to stay top priority or we can't function. And I know, especially when we're trying to, like for my audience, write books that, God has given us those messages, and that again, that, when that falls to a lower priority, you really feel it in so many different ways. And I could certainly attest to that. So talk about just what you shared with us, about being in harmony in work and rest and learning to not balance your family and entrepreneurship. I'd love for you to share just kind of how, as you've learned through all that, how that kind of led you to where you are today as you're coaching women that are women of faith and entrepreneurs. I'd love to just kind of hear how that kind of happened for you.
Yeah, I think God took me through a really, really difficult season in 2020 where I was doing all the things and I felt like I was doing them really well. I was not homeschooling prior to 2020. And honestly, as a 9 and as a wing 1, I am very much a pull up your bootstraps, I can get it done kind of girl. And 2020 really obliterated all of that for me because my 2 oldest came home and needed to be homeschooled. And my time, air quotes, my time looked totally different at that point. And God began to open up my eyes to the fact that I was going to try and complicate to try to keep all the balls in the air. And what he really wanted me to do was lay it all down and then let him tell me which ones I was supposed to pick up. And that was very, very, very difficult for me to surrender that. And then as he gradually gave me space and freedom to pick things back up as 2020 went on, that was when he began to give me this heart that maybe there were other women out there too who were struggling like I was, of wanting to pick things up and not knowing exactly how to do it, and then getting them up in the air and then figuring out how is this going to be sustainable. And through what I have learned, maybe I could coach other women to do the same. And that I had to get through imposter syndrome, right? Of saying, well, I'm not far enough ahead yet, God, like I don't have it perfectly all together yet. But he just confirmed over and over and over that we don't need to be 15 steps ahead. Sometimes we just need to be 2 or 3 steps ahead. And it has just been such a beautiful thing to be able to walk alongside other women who are seeking to keep their priorities in harmony and build the things that God has given them to build. And at the same time, put him and their families at number 1 priority and giving them practical ways to do that. Not just, slapping a motto on it or giving them even scriptures, but really getting into it with them and saying, what are some practical strategies that we can put into place to help you sustain and keep your eyes on Jesus at the same time? And it has been, I can say 100%, the most thrilling, the hardest, most fulfilling thing I have ever done. And I could literally do it 24/7, 365 and not get tired. And that's how I know that this is really what God has for me.
Oh gosh, yeah, I can tell you're very passionate about it. It's definitely a calling that he has put on you and a gift as well. And I love what you said about whenever we put something into place, how can we sustain that? And it's often we can't do it alone, right? We need him.
Mhm.
We also need somebody more practical like yourself to kind of speak into us. Cause I think about, we do hear, like you just said, like little taglines or sweet mottos that we see that they're like, oh yeah, that sounds great. We, save them to look at them over and over. And it's, like how you said, just sometimes you have to just lay everything down and just ask him, which of these balls I'm laying down, I can't juggle them anymore. Which of these balls I'm laying down, do you want me to pick back up? And ask him to help us do that. And then hopefully have somebody like you to kind of coach us along with that practical. I think that you're so right. It's just, that's what's missing is like, we can all say, this sounds really great and we want to do it. And we want to put our family first. We want to put our time with God first. But if you don't have somebody to kind of really show you, what does that look like practically every single day? And when you stump and, fall off the bandwagon and you're not doing as well, like you need somebody to turn to say, I'm not doing a very good job of it. Can you kind of help me through that? So I love that you're here today to talk about all that, Shelley. And I would love for you to share about Cultivate, your community, with our listeners in case that's something they would like to check out and have some more time with you. And I know, will you share, but I guess both, but your coaching community as well as your one-on-one coaching?
Yes. So our group coaching really happens in the private Facebook group called Cultivate. And you can search for that and then request to join. It is completely free. It is for Christian women in entrepreneurship. We do have some members that aren't entrepreneurs. They maybe have other things that they're working on. They don't consider themselves entrepreneurs, but they really are seeking to create this harmony between work and rest. And they find the resources there to be helpful. So that's just a great place. We have trainings in there, guest people that come in and share about their expertise and then just support each other along the way. And we also have a Bible study that happens in that group as well, because we believe that being in the Word is the best place to be equipped to be these women of God that He's called us to be. And then, of course, we have our Instagram account that you can follow. There are a lot of resources there. And then outside of that, we have the podcast and then one-on-one coaching. And the one-on-one coaching is really an opportunity to have a deep dive into these rhythms of work and rest. And it can look different for different clients. It depends on kind of where God has you and the areas. It may be more home driven aspects that we work on, or it may be more business related. But it's just a chance for us to dig in and say, how can we practically really help you flourish as the woman of God that you've been created to be? And at the same time, really move the needle in those areas that you're feeling stuck in. And that only opens 2 times a year. So we will have another round of one-on-one coaching opening again in January of 2022. And those are limited spots. So if you go and follow Instagram, look at our website, cultivatelegacy.org, you can get all the information as that comes up in January.
Okay, super. Yeah, we'll be sure and put links to that in the show notes. Well, I'd love for you to share from your community or from your coaching clients. Can you share maybe just any examples of some of your clients that have found that harmony versus balance lifestyle, especially in their work?
Yes. Yeah. So one of my clients, Kelly, came to me and she had just landed a dream job. She was becoming a foster care advocate in her state. And this was something that she had wanted to do for a really long time. And she knew that it was going to really allow her to grow in some areas that she was passionate about, but she wasn't really sure that she had quite the skill set that she needed. But she's a mom of 2 little boys and busy, and she just was feeling scattered about how to grow in these areas and still be present with her boys. And so she came to me and we worked together for 4 weeks and worked very hard on specifically helping her hone her communication skills and really become more confident communicating about the advocacy that she was going to have with these foster families and foster kids. And I am so proud of the work that she has done. She now is confidently walking into her state legislature. She's walking into churches and groups of people to share how they can be part of being advocates for reunification of foster families and foster kids. And it has been such a beautiful thing to watch her grow and use her skills, and at the same time gain clarity along the way that she can do this and still be a present mom with her boys And through that process, in fact, one of her boys was a foster son, and they actually finalized his adoption through that process too.
Oh,
And that
wow.
was really neat to see. But she's just one example of someone who was feeling kind of uncertain and unclear. And after 4 weeks of working together, felt that she had the strategy and the confidence to really move into what God was calling her to do.
Oh, that's so great. Yeah, I know a lot of our listeners may be in that same position where they feel like there's a book inside of them, but they don't know how to step into that. Am I going to pursue this because I am trying to raise my family at the same time? Or, some of them start a podcast and just like they just have a message burning on their heart and they don't really know what they're going to do with it. They just know they want to get started, but they do need a little direction to get there. So I love that. And I'll definitely put all the links to your resources in the comments. So this has been great, Shelley. I'd love to. Are there any parting words you'd like to share just as our listeners think about, if they're heading into a book launch season or, they're just have that feeling of I'm not doing enough, but I keep thinking, how can I balance it all? We've kind of covered that, but maybe a little bit of more words of encouragement for them as they kind of look at it and just think, how am I going to do this?
I think as women, we can easily get distracted by all the things that need to be done. We're doers, right? And that is how God has wired us. And it's such a beautiful part of how he has wired us. But I think we have to remember something that someone reminded me of last week that I needed to be reminded of, which is God made us human beings first before he made us human doings. And that being part is really the number one priority of being with Jesus. And if you can just prioritize that, honestly, I know it sounds simple and it sounds cliche, but I've experienced it in my own life. And Kim, I know you can attest to this as well. When you make Jesus your number one, you will be amazed at how he can lead, guide, and direct you to make the next right step. And then everything else from there, you just take the next right step. You don't have to have all the answers, but start with him because he knows you better than anybody else. He created you. He created the universe and holds it together. And he knows what it is that he has given you to do. And so starting with him first, number one, and then letting him guide you to make that next right step. And it's just one foot in front of the other, honestly.
Yeah, I love that. And yeah, especially as, we try to figure out what we're going to do to market our books. It's like just going back to him, he's going to give us that direction. And then, just know, you don't have to do, I like what you say about, you don't have to do it all right now. You don't have to do it all, period, but you don't have to do it all right now. And so I think that's so important to remember. Well, Shelley, so tell us where the best place is for our listeners to connect with you.
So the best place is Instagram right now. The best place is Instagram at cultivate_legacy. That's where you can find me a lot of times. I also have a personal account, but I'm more active over there on the Cultivate account. And then if you want to get in contact with me over email, you can find all of that information on the cultivatelegacy.org website. And I know Kim will put all of that in the show notes. I would love to connect with you, to chat with you, to get to know you, to find out what God has put on your heart, to encourage you and be a cheerleader along the way for whatever it is that God has for y'all.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you so much, Shelley. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Kim.
Oh, y'all, is everybody imagining those glass and plastic balls you're juggling now when marketing your books, or possibly juggling all those ideas swimming around in your head? As we head into the holidays, I pray you find some quiet time to ask God, what is going to stay in the air that I'm juggling today? And what am I going to let fall on the ground and stay there as I seek harmony between work and rest while marketing my books? I'd love to hear from you. If you found encouragement on this episode of Book Marketing Mania, I'd be so grateful if you left a review, as that will help other authors and bloggers discover the show. Thanks for tuning in today, and I'll see you next time as I cheer you on to market your book one podcast at a time.